what would you say to get people back to a rational mindset in crazy times are the top couple of things they should be doing right now?
The first thing is, especially when we talk about investing in money into these types of assets, if you're a beginner, do not use debt. Stay away from debt because debt amplifies your mistakes. And debt is what turns a small little correction into a major crash. Because now, we'll give you an example of what's happening right now. If home prices correct by 10 to 15%, you might not think it's that big of a deal. But right now, the average down payment on a home in the United States is 6%. So what does that mean? If you get a home with 6% down and home prices fall by 15%, well, now the correction can turn into a crash because now you have a whole section of the country that's underwater on their homes. And when you're underwater on your home and you struggle to make a payment, well, now you're much less incentivized to continue making the payments. Instead of sending in a check, you might just send in the keys because you feel like, well, I'm underwater. What's the point? And that's what can create a influx of supply because now more people start selling, or you see forced sales because now lenders or banks or, in the stock market, you have margin calls. All these things can then force more sales, causing an increase in supply, causing asset prices to go down more. So the first thing is to avoid the debt. And then second is when you see that type of distress, that fear, that's when you want to be, the old saying is be fearful when others are greedy, be greedy when others are fearful. When asset prices are falling, that's when you want to start thinking like the minority, not like the majority, and look for the good assets and start buying. And if you don't want to spend the time, effort, and research to actually research an asset, like if we're talking about the stock market, if you don't want to read the earnings calls, if you don't want to study the company, read the financials, then don't invest in the company, invest in something like an ETF or an index fund. That way you can limit your risk, because if you're just throwing your money into a company because you think it's a good investment, now you're gambling. Investing is different than gambling, although a lot of people want to argue that it's not. It really is different than gambling if you understand how it works. And if you are not willing to put in the work as an investor, that's fine. It's not for everybody. That limit your risk by using something like an ETF or an index fund, both low costs. That way you can buy these things at a discounted price without taking on all the risk of investing your money, throwing all of your money into one company.
Yeah, and talking about de-risking, obviously one of the biggest ways to de-risk is by who you know versus what you know, right? Getting in the right community, being around other people that are savvy and are able to share information as well. Obviously, you have market briefs or briefs, which we'll share with everyone so they can all see what you're doing and how you're doing it. We obviously have our Genius group where we have groups in all different cities and countries. What would you say in terms of, number one, people investing in themselves, including in the communities they go to? Number two, any particular communities outside of yours and mine that you would recommend to people that you think are great, that they should be thinking about? And number three, without overloading you, international, to what extent should people be thinking beyond their borders?
So for number one, regarding investing in yourself, this is one of the most important things that you can do. And it becomes especially when you're starting off, it can become tricky because you're saying, I don't want to spend maybe $20 on a book, or maybe I don't want to spend $1,000 or $5,000 on this coaching. But instead of focusing on the price, this is where you want to really focus in on the value. Because if someone said it's going to cost you $5,000 to learn this thing, but it's going to make you $50,000 worth of money, well, now it's like a no-brainer, right? Pay $5,000 to earn 50, but you don't know if it's going to earn you 50 or not. So this is where you want to make sure you're learning from good sources, but work your way up. Before you spend $5,000 on anything, start by watching YouTube videos for free, listen to podcasts, then advance by reading books. Then as you start reading books, start doing. Then maybe buy a class on something. And this can be from real estate investing to stock market investing to financial planning to whatever it might be. And then if you want to continue learning while doing, then you can invest even more into something like coaching and consulting, but you have to be willing to invest in yourself. The second thing, when it comes to looking for groups, I don't know of any major groups like that off the top of my head. Obviously, you have a great community that has a ton of resources for the people listening to this, watching this. So check that out, marketbriefs.com, briefs.co. But then beyond that, for me, what has worked for me is reading books because, I didn't grow up with any sort of mentors like that. I didn't have real estate investors in my family or investors like that. I didn't know what dividends were. So for me, the way that I learned was by reading a lot of books, but more particularly biographies. Look at some of the people that have inspired you and look at their biographies, and you're going to learn so much. And it might not even be about things that you think you're going to learn about. Like when I read Ray Dalio's books, I learned a lot about mental health because he had a son that was facing mental health issues, and he talked about that. And you learn so many different things from these biographies, and it makes you a much more well-rounded person. Like you talk about, decentralizing education. If you want to get an MBA level education on how to run a business, go out and read 20 of the top business books on Amazon that have the top ratings. And I promise you, you are going to get so much value out of those 20 books at a fraction of the price that the MBA will cost you, and then go out and do something based off of what you learn. And the third question of looking beyond your borders. Yeah. And, this is becoming more and more attractive and more interesting nowadays. And there's a number of ways that you can play this. The safest way for you to look outside of your borders would be to look at like something like an ETF that gives you exposure to emerging markets. Emerging markets are companies and countries that are outside of the United States, if you're in the USA, and now you get exposure to those. If you have more capital, well, then you could look at actually going into other countries. Like I know we didn't go too deep into the UK, but the UK is facing a pretty severe property and housing crisis in the coming years, because unlike the United States, the United Kingdom doesn't really offer 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Many of them are variable interest rates, or they readjust after 2 years or 5 years, and some of them 10 years. And in 2022 to 2023 and 2024, you're going to see millions of households see their interest rates readjust at an interest rate many multiples higher than what they originally got. And couple that with the energy crisis, couple that with the inflation, couple that with the economic slowdown, and you have the workings of a pretty bad property crisis. But now, what does that mean? Well, if you're a real estate investor, that could create real estate opportunities for you. But if you want to be investing in an outside country, which I have never done, so I can't really say if it's good or not, but you would need more capital to do that to make it worthwhile, to go there, learn the laws, and start all over there, but then also protect your assets somewhere else. It gives you a little bit of a protection because it's operating on a different currency. But that's where also, like I have a friend of mine who is from the United States, but is developing property in Guatemala. Part of it is a way to protect currency and to get out of the United States, and because it's a place where a lot of people who are digital nomads are moving to, because the cost of living in the United States is so high. So people are moving to a cheaper cost of living. So that was his justification to start buying land and actually developing land there. I've just never done it before myself, but there is a good argument to be made that there is value in that.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Great advice. And I love the way you're thinking. If there was one thing in addition that you would add for everybody from the point of view of how to keep your radar on, right? I love the way that like every day you have up-to-date information, which clearly comes from watching a whole bunch of different sources. And most people, they still just watch the mainstream media, right? Which is the worst place to go for sources. So how do you go about making sure you're keeping informed on what really is going on there? And what would you recommend for everyone, whatever their specific focus is in the way that they're going to be building their wealth?
So for me, it's kind of funny. I started because when I started, the pandemic hit in 2020, and there was so much news happening. And that's when I switched to making daily YouTube videos, because there was so much craziness happening. So I have a team here originally at the Minority Mindset. And I said, look, can you guys give me a daily breakdown of what's happening in all the different sectors of the economy? That way I can make better and more educated videos, because I'm already doing my research. But if I have multiple people out there trying to figure everything out and doing the research and analysis for me, that helps me out. And that was when I was like, this is a pretty good thing. How about we market this as a newsletter for free? And we did that just kind of as a test, and many people started signing up and enjoyed it. And that's when we branded it as Market Briefs, and that became Market Briefs. And then that grew to a pretty large newsletter relatively quickly. We haven't spent a penny in advertising yet. And now that has become briefs.co, which will also become include a business briefs newsletter. So that's how I started getting my information. But I also I watch a ton of YouTube. I watch YouTube videos that are not just in America. I actually watch videos, interviews, and people in different countries, sometimes in different languages, to see what's happening in different parts of the world. Like my family's from a state in India called Punjab, and so I watch some of the news over there, just to kind of get an idea of what people feel about the economy in different parts of the world. And I read a lot of newsletters, not news, but newsletters. I pay a lot of money for a lot of these subscriptions to just get an idea of what's happening. So it keeps me up to date.
That's super. I love that. And that kind of brings up a thought that I think is so important, which is when you have a responsibility to pass on some information to somebody, like the fact that, you know, you got the brief. So it's like, right, well, then I need stuff for that. So, hey, let's build a focus, let's build a team, or even doing a YouTube video, or even us being here today. It's like, hey, what information do we want to pass on to others forces us to then have to be learners ourselves as well. And I definitely think that is a great thing for everyone to be taking away from this as well. Even if they don't have a YouTube channel, they can pass something on to their kids. They can pass something on to their husband or wife. They can pass on to a friend and say, hey, this is a piece of information they're going to find valuable. And what can I actually share with them tomorrow? Well, I better go out and find something today that I'm passionate about that can actually then be passed on too. So with that, I just want to say a huge thank you for actually not just being here, but just for everything you're doing, because you are actually influencing so many people out there. Really, really appreciate it. And I know everyone's got a lot from this interview as well. All the best, and look forward to having you back on our channel again.
Thank you so much. This was a great interview. Great questions. And I would love to help out in any way that I can. Keep up the great work.
Thanks very much. See you later.
Bye.